am delighted to introduce our next session, which is a fireside chat between Ed Murphy, CEO of Empower, and I'll just put a sidebar that Ed and Empower have been very strong supporters of eBree, and we so much appreciate that. And Ed will have his fireside chat with Stephanie Dewey, who is a senior producer at CNBC. Their topic is the post-election retirement update, what's on the horizon. So so looking forward to hearing from Ed and Stephanie. Thank you so much.
Okay, first question, where's the fireplace? So, Ed, thanks so much for being with us. I was going to start with a pulse on the Secure 2.0, but given that I'm CNBC and everyone in this room has been rapidly paying attention to the panels here, I thought I'd give you a few CNBC headlines that we've just seen. The S&P has broken below a major support level. The Dow tumbles 700 points, was 5, I had to cross it out, make it 7, as Trump tariffs rekindle market rout. Delta's lowering outlook shows economic uncertainty unfolding in real time. So how are retirement plan investors viewing this market right now?
Well, is this on? You guys hear me? Oh, I have to turn it on. Okay, here we go. There's no question there's a lot of uncertainty. The volatility is concerning to people. But you know, the fact of the matter is we've had, I think, 27 corrections of 10 to 20% since 1964. That's one every 2 years. The last one was July of 23. Today, I didn't look at the numbers, but we're down probably 6% year to date on the S&P. So it's going to happen, and there's lots of different triggers. But I think, for the most part, what we're seeing among our 19 million investors is they're staying the course. A little bit of flight to quality, as you would expect. I mean, retail investors tend to time things wrong anyway. So some of that is playing out where we're seeing some movement to stable value and cash-type instruments. But for the most part, I think the industry, combined with the media, has done a very good job, I think, over the years, encouraging people to think about this as a longer-term investment. And with people typically getting paid every 2 weeks or once a month, you know, they are dollar cost averaging into a lower market. So I think the volatility is likely here to stay for a bit. And I'm not a prognosticator, but I suspect that, you know, we'll see a bit more downward pressure on the markets.
And getting back to the pulse check on Secure 2.0, we've seen a lot of changes this year: auto enrollment, expanded access for part-time workers, super catch-up contributions. How's it going?
I think it's going well. I mean, I think we should all feel really good about the fact that there probably isn't another area where we have the level of support that we have on a bipartisan basis for retirement legislation. It's actually really encouraging. And if you think about what Secure 2.0 did, and if you think about the tax expenditures associated with them, they're heavily weighted towards low and middle income workers. In fact, the largest one being the Savers Match, which goes into production in 2026. So I think it's been constructive. I think it'll continue to be constructive. I'm not particularly optimistic about any additional legislation in 2025. I think between the budget bill and the impending tax bill, along with other priorities that the White House has, I don't think we'll see anything near term on the horizon. I also think that, you know, areas like, you know, are the tax incentives sacrosanct? I believe the answer to that question is yes. I think the tax incentives will remain. And
how big of a fight do you think that will be?
I don't think it's a big fight. I think there's a lot of support on both sides of the aisle. And
There's just so many tax priorities, right? Like, don't tax Social Security, don't tax.
true. But if you go
tips.
back to 2017, when Chairman Brady of the House Ways and Means Committee was advocating for essentially 100% Roth system, particularly for higher income workers, that was flatly rejected. And Trump subsequently came out against it as well. So I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just telling you what I believe. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the tax incentives will remain. And the support for the retirement system, the private retirement system, remains very strong.
Do we need a secure 3.0? I mean, what could be better?
Absolutely. I think it's a public-private partnership that's been around for 40 years, that's continued to evolve with tremendous industry innovation combined with public policy support. That's going to continue. We do have 128 million Americans in the system. You know, if you look at public pensions and private pensions, in total, it's $42 trillion saved. So I'm just going to tell you, I'm not in the camp that the sky is falling. It makes for great headlines, but, and we can go through a lot of that data if you want, but I think the system is very, very strong. So what would 3.0 look like? Well, from my perspective, and I've been very vocal about this, I would advocate for a coverage requirement. You know, the state auto IRAs, I think, have been constructive. You have 17 states. The balances are small. It's 2 million accounts, average is $2,000. But it is spawning, for the companies that will survive, it is spawning and will spawn more 401k, larger plans. The challenge in that space is 50% of small businesses fail within 5 years. So that's why we're not directly in the state auto IRA business, but we are in the business of trying to get small plans to adopt 401k plans.
And is that what you see as the biggest obstacle for small plans, is just their business being a going concern?
I mean, I think that's one of the obstacles. I think the other obstacles have largely been addressed. There was concern about complexity. That's been addressed. There's been concern about the cost to set up these plans. That's been addressed with tax credits. And then there's been great industry innovation to take down the cost, where there's more straight-through processing, setting these plans up and administering these plans can be done in a very cost-effective way. That was not the case 5 to 7 years ago. We certainly didn't have a solution. So I'm pretty encouraged in that regard. And the other thing I would just say, when people talk about the coverage gap, yes, there are issues with existing plans not driving high enough participation, but that can be solved with auto-enroll. They just need to adopt it. The tools are there. The bigger issue is the companies with 10 employees and less, 72% of them don't offer a plan. So you can do the numbers. It's like 35 million Americans work for those companies. So that's the issue around coverage, principally. The rest is very easily solvable. I think we've got about 55% of our plans, maybe a little bit more, that offer auto-enrollment. A lesser amount offer auto-escalation. But it is something that, obviously, our teams really encourage.
Some other innovation that we've heard about is bringing private equity into the defined contribution space. What has to happen for that to be, well, does that need to happen?
Absolutely.
And why?
But what needs to happen first is you need litigation reform. And I think that may take some time, but eventually I think we will get that too.
The litigation reform, though, feels a little bit like a catch-22. Like, if you have a fiduciary responsibility and you're meeting that, then what's the mechanism to enforce private equity going awry if you don't have the ability to sue?
Let's talk about the fact that private equity has existed in defined benefit plans for 35 years. So it's good enough for the corporations to put it in their own pensions, but it's not good enough for 128 million Americans to have access to the best performing asset class in the last 30 years, asset classes. And it's a structural shift. You know, there's probably 40 to 50% less publicly traded companies than there were 20 years ago. And there's 9 times more private companies with revenues over 100 million. So how can we not give individual investors access to that asset class that's growing exponentially? There's a strong accent to the private markets, and there's ways to do it. We can get it, I don't know if we have time to get into all the details, but there's ways to do it that are very straightforward. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to happen. You know, if you think about, you know, the first Trump administration, they came out in support of it. There was a Biden supplemental that came out, I think, in 2021 that, you know, exercised caution around it. But there's a lot of movement in this area now, not as a standalone investment, by the way, but kind of a multi-asset class or through a collective investment trust. And all of the perceived inhibitors, like liquidity and cost and structure, it's all being addressed.
That can be figured out.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that the biggest part of the equation right now is the education around it. How do you educate individual investors who might not know the difference between, you know, a stock and a bond or an ETF and a mutual fund?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Private equity.
So again, I think it's evolving, but our point of view on this is that you would have an advisor at the plan level, and you would have an advisor at the individual level. Again, not a standalone investment, but an investment that's part of think about almost like a target date construct, a multi-asset type construct. And you're looking at, you'd set some levels that are appropriate. So maybe 10 to 15% of somebody's assets. So think about this. Everybody talks about liquidity. Let's just say you had a $100,000 401k, and you wanted to get exposure to top decile, top quartile equity managers or private equity, private asset class type managers. By the way, we don't manufacture any of this, so we would just be working with partners and we would support the distribution of it. I'm not even sure there's anything in it for us from an economic standpoint. I just believe in it passionately. I think it's the right thing to do. So if it's 20, 30-year money, let's say you had a liquidity issue. You could take it from the other 80%. Or in the case of the construct that we're working on, there would be a liquidity sleeve within that framework. But I think you're less likely to have to access that or tap into that.
And what's the biggest, I mean, what do you see as the biggest upside? Just returns for the individuals, or is it also an economic boom?
I think it's better outcomes on a risk-adjusted basis. I think it's better outcomes, yeah.
We've seen Elon Musk and his Doge team lay off thousands of federal employees, creating what some analysts have called a deregulation by layoff, especially calling agencies like the CFPB, et cetera. What do you think of that approach?
Well, I think that, I don't know the exact number, but the federal thrift plan has over 6 million federal workers in it. It might be 7 million. How many of those are active and inactive, I don't know. I think there's a belief that many share that the federal government has become increasingly too large. I think the concern is how much glass do you break and how much disruption, and to what extent does it lead to ill-advised decisions, both at the kind of the human dimensional level, but also just in terms of how we function and how we operate as a government. When you think about critical functions that federal workers are involved with. So, you know, it's clear that this is the path that they're going down. I think that's in part why you see the financial markets reacting the way they are, because there is a lot of uncertainty. You know, hopefully it's done with some level of discipline and precision. I think that's all we can hope for and expect.
With a scalpel, not a chainsaw?
Yeah, yeah, right. But I will say, you know, it's interesting because when Trump was elected, the prevailing view was that we were going to move into this environment of deregulation, and that it was going to lead to an M&A boom. And the opposite's happened. January was the worst January for M&A in the last 12 years. Who would have thought? And so you've seen a decided slowdown in that regard. You know, obviously rates have stayed higher, so cost of capital is higher. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the question is really, you know, where are we 4 to 6 months from now? Now you go back to the performance of the market. We had back-to-back years of 20+% S&P. Now we've got a market down 6, and the world's crashing. You know, so hopefully cooler heads prevail both at the government level and then with investors, and we can kind of get through this period and get back to some level of stability and normalcy, but, you know, to be determined.
Now, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you see as sort of the best case, worst case scenario over the next 6 months? For markets, for the economy?
Oh, geez, I'd have to ask my chief investment strategist. I don't really know the answer to that. I think it's hard to say. There's just so much unpredictability, you know, from a geopolitical standpoint. You know, it looks like there'll be enough votes to get the budget extension. So, you know, that gives the administration, you know, some headway to start working on tax reform. We'll see, but it looks like they have the votes to keep the government open until September, I think, is the next time. So that would be a good thing, by the way, in my view. I just think to have a government shut down in light of everything else that's going on would be completely ill-advised. I mean, you think the financial markets are struggling now.
Well, maybe we just give it over to ChatGPT and put it in and see what we get, which brings me to the role AI is playing in your business now. We heard Nationwide's putting its AI digital workers on its organizational chart. Are you doing something similar? What role is AI playing for Empower?
Yeah, I think like everybody, we're all in. We've been all in on this for years on traditional AI, but Gen AI, I'd say over the last 2 years. My chief technology officer signed up for a 25% increase in productivity. So that means instead of cutting 25% of our developers, we're actually going to do more production. We're going to do more output, which means we can bring more value-added services to our clients. So our team signed up for that using Copilot, you know, very successful development software. So we're seeing lots of efficiency with writing new code, writing old code, testing. So that's one deployment. We've got it deployed in other areas around advanced call analytics and some of the things that we're doing with the 8 million calls that we take, and using AI to understand what went right or wrong about a call, and then being able to coach against that. We're using it on the client servicing side. We have a knowledge management type software. You know, the business is, as you guys know, is incredibly technical. So when you hire people, they need to know a lot. So how do you make that simpler so you can reduce cycle time and get the customer issue resolved very, very quickly? First call resolution, that type of thing. So yeah, we've got, if anything, I don't think we're spending enough. And, but we have very specific, concrete targets that we're pursuing, so we can, you know, measure effectiveness, get the win, and then move on to the next one. So that's sort of the approach we're taking.
And how do you see employees and plan participants reacting to AI or the idea of AI? We heard a little bit about, you know, AI induces anxiety. But are you hearing, is that what you're hearing from your employees and
No.
your plan participants, or how are they viewing it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think everybody realizes that there might be a skill reset for some folks. But, you know, as long as there's growth in the underlying business, there's opportunity. I remember back in 2015 when we announced we were going to open up a captive in Bangalore. And I think we had 3,500 employees at the time. And everybody was, oh, geez, you're going to move all of our jobs to Bangalore. Today we have 2,800 people in Bangalore, and we have 11,000 people in the US. So, you know, clients are interested in what we're doing from an AI perspective because they always want to pay less. So to what extent can we deliver better efficiency and better quality? And I think on that score, we feel really confident we have a good story to tell. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I haven't seen the anxiety on the employee side.
And what sort of check and balance do you put with AI? I mean, you have a lot of humans in the mix. Is that the true check, or can you train AI to fix its own mistakes?
Well, as was discussed in some of the previous sessions, a big part of it is the governance process that you have in place, and making sure that you have a system that and a set of capabilities that are done with integrity. If you think about it, the bad guys are using Gen AI too, right? We have $1.8 trillion on our platform. Oh, we did. It's probably 1.6 now with the market, but and 18 million investors, right? So the biggest commitment that we make is safeguarding their assets, and so part of the way we're leveraging AI is both defensively and offensively against the bad actors, and they pervade the market. So, and they're really smart. So you got to stay one step ahead of them. That's the one thing when people say, what keeps you up at night? That's the one thing that keeps me up at night.
And since we're here in Washington, the cherry blossoms are getting ready to pop soon. But I'm curious what message you want regulators, lawmakers, and the administration to know right now about the retirement system and how well prepared Americans are for their retirement.
Yeah, I'd say, more people are covered than they've ever been. People are saving more than they ever have. And we have a dynamic system that continues to iterate and evolve with innovation and a strong public-private partnership. It needs to continue. And so from that standpoint, I'm really encouraged because, we have some great elected officials that moved on, unfortunately, that had great expertise, like Ben Cardin and Rob Portman. But we still have Congressman Neal from Massachusetts and others that are real experts that want to see this work get completed. So to your point, I think there is a secure 3.0. And, I think we made a lot of strides. I mean, if you look at the numbers in the low income category, what they're saving today versus what they were saving 15, 20 years ago, that low income cohort is on target to exceed 100% of their pre-retirement income. Like, you'll never hear that in the media. It's true, 100%, through Social Security and through ancillary savings that they have. Here are a couple of other data points that I think are really important. So 90% of people entering retirement are drawing income from a retirement check, from a retirement account. 90%. 75% of 72-year-olds are taking distributions from either their account or a spouse account. 75% of 72-year-olds. So the retiree class today is as rich and as wealthy as it's ever been. So I'm not here to say the work is done, but I am here to say it would be absurd and ludicrous to try to say you're going to take over the private retirement system or you're going to scrap it and come up with something else. We have all the tools at our disposal. Don't underestimate the power of auto-enrollment, auto-re-enrollment, auto-escalation, the coverage mandate or requirement. When I talk to the Republicans on the Hill about this, they don't like mandates. We have mandates everywhere. Social Security is a mandate. You and I can't choose not to participate in Social Security. So why, if we've created these tax incentives for small businesses, if we've created the environment with technology and innovation to make it easy for people to adopt these plans, why wouldn't we mandate it? Not a match. The match should be discretionary. The company should decide whether they want to match or not based on the performance of their company. But to have a plan, I think, is essential if we're going to get serious about whatever gaps exist. So I'm particularly sanguine about it. I'm encouraged. And I know a lot of the people in this room have done a lot of great work to get the system to where it is today. So everybody here should be very proud.
Well, on that encouraging note, I'm going to say thank you very much.